In It Together SC and the Diabetes Action Council of South Carolina present Wellness Wednesday every Wednesday on Coping with Tre Tailor. Coping. Hey there, good afternoon. You're watching Coping, hosted by me, Tre Tailor. We're giving you info and advice to help you thrive and survive in life because we will always be coping with something. Today, and for the last couple of weeks, we've been dealing with and coping with pollen. Dr. Emily Campbell joins us. She is a board-certified allergist and immunologist and assistant professor of pediatrics at the Medical University of South Carolina. Dr. Campbell, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Tre.
Hey there. We can't wait to talk to you because we are coping with pollen.
Yes, it is definitely pollen season here in
It
South
is
Carolina.
pollen season. We're going to talk with Dr. Campbell coming up next on Coping. I'm Tre Tailor, but first, hey, don't forget to check the scroll at the bottom of the screen for resources concerning COVID, vaccines, testing, financial resources also pertaining to COVID, jobs, housing, help with your bills, and information on scholarships and several community events. All of that stuff will be scrolling at the bottom of the screen, and we want you to post and share so we can get the message to the masses. You're watching Coping, hosted by me, Tre Tailor. We're giving you info and advice to help you thrive and survive in life because we will always be coping with something. We are streaming on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Please go to those social media outlets and like, share, and follow. We are coping with pollen. 'Tis the season to be sneezing. The pollen is popping. And Dr. Emily Campbell joins us. She's a board certified allergist and immunologist and assistant professor of pediatrics at the Medical University of South Carolina. And she has a dog, Hattie, who we may be seeing popping in and out.
Sorry.
It's okay. Hey, Hattie. We're just shouting out Hattie just in case we see her. Listen, you are not allergic to your dog, but can our pets suffer from allergies?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Yes, our pets can have allergies themselves too. Allergies in pets can look a little bit different in humans versus pets. So when pets have allergies, they can have things like chronic itching of the skin or always licking at their paws or often a lot of ear infection. So dogs can definitely have allergies too. Reversely, we can also be allergic to our pets.
Yes.
And it's kind of a misnomer, a hypoallergenic pet, right? My dog Hattie is a golden doodle, which has been branded as hypoallergenic, but that's actually not true.
Really?
Yeah, whatever we are allergic to in pets is actually in their skin and in their saliva and not in their fur or in their dander.
Oh, wow.
And so, you know, when you're thinking of purchasing a pet, I definitely always recommend people spend time with that animal to see how their symptoms react when they are interacting with a dog. I often hear my patients say, well, we have a dog at home and I never really have any problems with it. But when I go around other people's dogs, I definitely notice congestion, itchy eyes, and all of that. And that can definitely be true. We think by living with an animal, our immune system starts to adapt and we have less issues with it. But a misnomer that doodles and other kind of animals are hypoallergenic.
Well, let me ask you this then. Is it seasonal with dogs or pets too? Meaning, could we be allergic to our pets like now during pollen season, but not be allergic to them during other times of the year? And I know you're not a vet, but
I'm not a vet. I'm a human doctor. But I would say that dog allergen is what we call a perennial allergen, or it's present year round.
Right.
But our dog allergy we can notice it more when there's other pollen around too. Like if our allergies are already flared up from the pollen outside and we come home and we're around our dog and we are allergic to our dog, that can also contribute. The other thing that we have to think about is our dogs running around, rolling in the dirt, playing outside. And so they often can bring that pollen inside
That's what I
too
was going
and
to ask.
bring
Yeah.
in. Yeah. So if you can kind of wipe down your pet or wipe off those paws before they jump in your bed or roll in the couch,
Yeah.
that can be helpful from bringing out all the pollen outside in.
And if you're doing that, you probably, don't you think, need to wear gloves and a mask if you are wiping down your dog?
I would definitely always, recommend kind of a mask or some gloves or some kind of barrier for you guys for protection just to help because when we're wiping it off, that's going to be the time when the pollen is actually
Going
the
everywhere.
highest, going everywhere in our mouth and on our hands. And then, we use our hands and we rub our eyes because it's already itching. So we're transferring that pollen from our hands to our eyes. And now our eyes are swollen too.
Yeah, Dr. Emily Campbell joins us. We are talking about pollen. That's what we're coping with today. And here in Columbia, South Carolina, or in South Carolina, it rained and got a little bit cold, like over the weekend. Should that affect the pollen positively or negatively?
Yes, so it should help ideally. So we know that pollen counts are highest on dry, hot days where there's a lot of wind because the wind is carrying the pollen. When
Yeah.
it rains and when it cools off, that is in general the days where the pollen is lowest. Peak pollen season is kind of starting right now here in South Carolina. So right
Mhm.
now what pollen we're seeing is tree pollen. And starting kind of probably end of May, end of April or so, early April, we're starting to gonna see grass pollen. And then grass goes through the end of June or so. And then June to kind of August, no, September is going to be grass pollen. So, when I am talking to patients about when their pollen symptoms are, it can give me some guidance about what they are allergic to. If they say, every spring, every February,
Yeah.
March, when that pollen drops, I feel it. That usually is a hint to me that, oh, maybe tree pollen is what's causing a lot of their issues.
Do you usually have one and not the other, or if you're allergic to pollen, are you allergic to all pollen? Is all pollen created equal?
That's a great question.
Is an equal opportunity offender?
All pollen is not created equal.
Okay.
So just because you are allergic to one pollen does not necessarily mean you are allergic to another pollen. So there is some cross reactivity in between pollens. For example, oak tree and beech tree are very cross-reactive. So if you're allergic to one, you're usually allergic to the other.
Right.
Other examples, but that doesn't necessarily that you'll mean that you'll be allergic to grass pollen or weed pollen or mold or dog or cat or dust. 40% of people who have allergies have both seasonal symptoms, so some kind of pollen, and then non-seasonal symptoms or perennial, like dog or cat or cockroach or dust.
Cockroach.
And cockroach, yes, cockroach is one of the most common allergens. People find that very surprising and very disgusting, but cockroach is one of the most common allergens. And we
Oh,
know that
wow.
kids who are allergic to cockroaches and who have asthma have more flares of their asthma than kids who are not allergic to cockroaches. So
Yeah, I've got this 7-year-old over here that picks up every bug, every worm, everything. He's afraid of a dog, but not afraid of a worm. Who does that?
you know what? It's actually good. Kids should be outside getting dirty, getting
Yes.
messy, playing with those bugs. That's totally fine.
Oh my goodness. Dr. Emily Campbell joins us. We are coping with pollen today. It's a lot going on, Dr. Campbell. You've got the pollen, but then you've got COVID. It's flu and cold season. And I know over the weekend, I was feeling a little achy. I was a little feverish. I was sneezing. My throat was sore. And I did take a COVID test. I was negative, but I wasn't sure and I was thinking because I am allergic to pollen, but again, it was cold, it was rainy. I was thinking it wasn't pollen. I just kept drinking the NyQuil. I put NyQuil in my tea, girl, and I feel a little bit better. But how do you know what you have?
It's so hard to know what you have, right? And even I was in the same situation as you a few weekends ago where I just, was really sneezy, really congested, just
Yeah.
feeling really run down. I also took a COVID test, which was negative, which made me feel better.
Yes.
But it can be very hard to differentiate. There are some signs that kind of support an allergy more so than COVID or another kind of upper respiratory infection or common cold. And that tends to be itch. When we have a
Okay.
cold, we don't really always have that itch of our nose or itch of the
Yeah.
eyes.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that itch can be helpful in differentiating. Things that are seen in both of them, that congestion, that post-nasal drainage, or having that mucus that you're making. I always say it comes out one way or the other. So it either it comes out here or it
Yes.
goes down the
Yes.
back of your
Yes.
throat, right? And if it's running down the back of your throat, that can be what's actually causing that sore throat for you.
Right. Right.
And so both allergies and COVID and any other kind of sickness can cause both of those. So I don't, that part's hard, but that itchy nose, that itchy eyes is one thing that kind of leans towards allergies more so than any kind of illness. And that's kind of the best one to differentiate. But if you're worried or if you're questioning, it's easier to just take a COVID test to make you feel better.
Yeah. Hey, don't forget to check the scroll at the bottom of the screen. So many resources about COVID testing, vaccinations, also financial resources, scholarships, community events, and more. And please post and share so we can get the message to the masses. Today, we are coping with pollen. Dr. Emily Campbell joins us. She is completed her residency in pediatrics at Northwestern in Chicago. Let's talk about kids and pollen. Dr. Campbell, I mentioned that my 7-year-old, itchy eyes, scratchy throat.
Yeah.
And he reminded me the other week, make sure you wash your car because I have allergies.
Yeah. When you come out in the morning, your car is covered in
Yes.
pollen this time of year.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do we treat our children with these allergies? And is it severe enough for them to stay at home?
Yeah. So, kids and pollen. So, in general, when I see a kid in the office around, we don't really see that environmental or seasonal allergies probably until at the earliest 3 years old.
Oh,
The
wow.
reason is if you have a 1 year old or a 2 year old, they have only lived through one pollen season, right? And so typically it does take a little bit longer for us to develop those environmental or seasonal allergies.
Oh,
So
wow.
anything under 3 is not as common, not to say that it can't happen, but in general, when we were talking, you said your 7-year-old is suffering much more than your 4-year-old,
Yes.
which makes sense, right? Your 7-year-old has lived through a few more pollen seasons than your 4-year-old. So helpful hints for kids with pollen season. One is, it's really hard in the South when we're trying to avoid both the heat and the pollen. So the pollen counts are highest in the morning. So around 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. is when pollen tends to peak. And so things later in the evening, kind of moving around our play schedule, can be helpful if we want to do those walks towards, with daylight savings, towards the evening time when it's still light out and not as hot. That is a good kind of switch and an easy fix to help decrease pollen. Other things that can be helpful in kids are we kind of have a few different medications that we can give kids during pollen season. The easiest one and the ones that everyone knows are kind of antihistamines like Zyrtec, Allegra, Claritin, Benadryl. I personally try and avoid Benadryl. Everybody loves to reach for Benadryl, but it makes kids really sleepy and it
Yeah.
only lasts for 6 hours. And so newer meds like Allegra or Zyrtec are going to last 24 hours and in general shouldn't make you sleepy. The best thing actually for pollen is a nose spray. like a Flonase or something like that to help decrease that swelling and inflammation that we get from the pollen.
Yeah.
That can be a little bit of a hard sell in kids, which I
Yes.
totally understand.
Yeah, I'm giving him like a saline spray. He's not he doesn't love it, but
I know. So saline sprays, I love saline sprays, especially after he's done playing outside, right?
okay.
It's helpful to help rinse that pollen that's in our nose. The job of our nose, in part, is to help filter pollen out from getting into our lungs. And so the job of the nose is to trap that pollen. And so it sits in there. So if we can use a nasal spray or a nasal rinse, like
Neti
uh,
pot or
a
something?
neti pot. I like the plastic clear little sinus squeeze bottles. Those are great. It helps kind of flush everything out.
Okay.
But when you use it, make sure you're using like a distilled water. And then they also have some salt packets that you need to put in, or else if you just do straight water, it'll burn.
Yeah, kids and pollen, everybody in pollen. 'Tis the season, like I say, to be sneezing. And Dr. Emily Campbell is a board certified allergist and immunologist and a assistant professor of pediatrics at MUSC. Any final words to help us deal with this pollen season, Dr. Emily?
So final words. If you are having a lot of trouble, the best thing to do is go see a board certified allergist and immunologist. We can do some testing, kind of help identify triggers and give you a plan for pollen season that you can start. The best thing is to be ahead of the game. So I always compare it to a mosquito bite or just like pollen allergies, right? Once you start itching, you have to itch more and more.
Yeah.
Once you start sneezing, once you start itching those eyes, once it starts pouring, it's a cycle, right? So it's always easiest to start ahead of the game a little bit before. So if you know that you're going outside, or if you know that you're going to be active or cutting grass or something like that, try and take steps before you go outside, like taking a Zyrtec or an Allegra or something like that. If you're allergic to grass and you're mowing the grass, it's helpful to wear a mask. If you're going to be outside and you also have a lot of puffy eyes, sunglasses are great. They're cool. They work. So yes, but any problems, come see a board certified allergist, immunologist.
And you mentioned earlier in the show about if you have a pet, make sure you wipe them off. Well, you should change your clothing too. And what do you do? Do you got to wash your hair every day? Do you rinse your car off every day? I mean, I rinse my car off, and then of course tomorrow it's the same thing.
So biggest steps that you should take are when you're coming in from being outside are changing your clothes. And if you can, shower off, rinse that pollen off, especially before you go lay down into bed. We don't want to transfer anything that's been on ourselves into our bed or around our house. That's probably going to be the most bang for your buck. Right? That's where we spend the most time. We're not spending a lot of time in our car. And the pollen's mainly outside of our car. So you can wash your car off, but wear some sunglasses or a mask when you're doing it, when you're hosing it down. But again, it's probably just going to get polleny again.
Yeah.
I know.
Dr. Emily Campbell, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for helping us get through this pollen season, because we've got a couple of more months to go, don't we?
We do. Unfortunately, pollen season is almost year round here in South Carolina because nothing really ever dies, unfortunately.
Dr. Emily Campbell, thank you again so much for joining us today on Coping. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Trey.
Absolutely. So listen, if you have a story or initiative that could help someone cope, please email booking@copingwithtretatailor.com. You can see that information scrolling at the bottom of the screen. If you've got a product or service that could help someone cope, please email copingwithtretatailor@gmail.com. We would love for you to be a proud sponsor, just like SCDHEC, In It Together SC, the Fifth Circuit Solicitor's Office, Attorney Byron Gibson, also Computers Unique, Jet Square Mall, Agape Counseling and Training Services, the South Carolina State Fair, also the Comet Bus System, Javis Financial Services, and Palmetto Media Connections. Coming up next, your devotional on Coping. I'm Tre Tailor.
Hello, I'm Carolyn Sawyer, an entrepreneur and caregiver. Part of taking care of your health is knowing if you're at risk of type 2 diabetes. Prediabetes is serious and puts you at risk for developing type 2 diabetes. Up to 90% of South Carolinians who have it don't know they have it. Visit inittogethersc.org. Take an online test to find out your risk and join a diabetes prevention program. This message brought to you by the Diabetes Action Council of SC.
Hi, I'm Tre Tailor. We'll always be coping with something, but God is always with us. Today's devotion says, when something in your life or thoughts make you anxious, come to me and talk to me. Thank you, Jesus, for this opportunity to trust you more. That's what we should say. Though the lessons of trust that I send you come wrapped with difficulties, the benefits far outweigh the cost. Well-developed trust will bring you many blessings, not the least of which is my peace. I have promised to keep you in perfect peace to the extent that you trust in me. The world has it backwards, teaching that peace is the result of having enough money, possessions, insurance, security systems. But my peace, God says, is such an all-encompassing gift that it's independent of all circumstances. Though you lose everything else, if you gain my peace, you are rich indeed. That's your devotional for today.
Coping, find peace of mind to survive through whatever. Coping, learning the way that we thrive all together. Coping, finding out what's real. Coping, we can heal, we can heal, we can heal. Coping with stress, coping with strife, bringing hope for success, for improving our life. Coping beyond hoping to do more than survive, ways to live a healthy life. Coping and promoting, learning what you can do, 6 ways to a better you. Coping, find peace of mind to survive through